"You stole that watch," Caroline Whitmore said, loud enough for every customer inside Langford Timepieces to hear. The store went silent. Marcus Ellison stood beneath the cold white lights of the Madison Avenue showroom, with both hands open, a plain charcoal coat over his shoulders, dark trousers, and old leather shoes, polished carefully, but worn at the creases. He wore no gold watch, no diamond cufflinks, no private security. No assistant stood behind him with a tablet. On the glass counter in front of him sat an empty black velvet tray, where, less than 1 minute earlier, a limited edition Chronos Black Meridian watch had rested under the light like a piece of midnight metal. A woman near the bridal display stopped breathing through her smile. A man in a navy suit lowered his champagne glass. Behind the counter, Tessa Blake pressed one hand to her mouth as if she had just witnessed a crime. But the tremble in her fingers came too late. Nora Fields, the new sales associate, looked toward the ceiling camera above display case 4. That camera could tell the truth, but Caroline was not looking for truth. She was looking at Marcus. Caroline stepped closer, her perfume sharp as glass in the chilled air. "Do not make this harder," she said. "Open your bag." Marcus looked at the small leather satchel near his feet. Inside was a policy review file, a fountain pen that had belonged to his father, and a sealed inspection note from Ellis & Shield Insurance. He did not touch the bag. He only asked, "Are you certain you want to accuse me before checking your own cameras?" Caroline smiled without warmth. "In my experience, innocent people cooperate." Marcus lifted his eyes. "In my experience, professionals investigate before they humiliate." A security guard moved toward the front door. The lock clicked. Somewhere near the register, a receipt printer rattled once and stopped. The sound was small, but everyone heard it. Within 20 minutes, Caroline Whitmore would learn that the man she had accused was Marcus Ellison, Chief Executive Officer of Ellis & Shield Insurance, the carrier reviewing the policy that protected every watch, every lawsuit, every theft claim, every civil liability exposure, and every business interruption risk in the Langford Timepieces chain. Within 20 minutes, the missing watch would be found in the place Caroline never wanted anyone to search. And within 20 minutes, the store would discover that the most dangerous thing in the room was not a black customer in a simple coat. It was the woman behind the counter who had turned loss prevention into a weapon. That was the mistake. Langford Timepieces sat on Madison Avenue between a private art gallery and a menswear boutique where the mannequins wore suits more expensive than most monthly rents. The store was narrow from the outside, but inside it stretched deep into quiet luxury. Black stone floors reflected the ceiling lights. Glass cases ran along both walls, each one glowing with watches displayed on velvet stands. The air smelled of polished wood, metal, expensive perfume, and coffee no one served unless a client looked worth the cup. Near the entrance, a brass plaque read, "Langford Timepieces since 1974. Below it, another smaller sign promised, "Trusted by collectors worldwide." Trust was everywhere in the branding, less so in the room. Marcus entered at 2:13 in the afternoon. The bell above the door made a soft chime. No one greeted him at first. Caroline Whitmore saw him from the far side of the showroom and paused with a tablet in one hand. She was in her early 40s, dressed in a cream suit and black heels that made a clean sound against the stone floor. Her hair was pinned back. Her smile was precise when she used it, but she did not use it on Marcus. She looked first at his coat, then his shoes, then his wrist. Empty. That was enough for her. Marcus felt the judgment before she spoke. Men like him learned to recognize the silence that comes before bad service. It was not always a stare. Sometimes it was a pause, a delay, a look exchanged between employees, a greeting withheld until a person proved he could afford kindness. He did not react. He walked slowly along the first case, studying the pieces. A woman in a white coat entered behind him, carrying a designer bag. Tessa Blake greeted her before the door closed. "Good afternoon. Welcome back, Mrs. Harrow. We have the new Geneva pieces ready for you." Champagne was offered in less than 30 seconds. Marcus looked at the watch case in front of him. No one offered him water. Nora Fields noticed. She stood near the middle counter, new enough to still believe service should follow policy, not instinct. Her badge had been pinned slightly crooked. She fixed it whenever she was nervous. She had been at Langford Timepieces for 11 weeks, and in those 11 weeks, she had learned that Caroline called discrimination discretion, intimidation loss prevention, and fear good instincts. Marcus turned toward Nora. "Good afternoon. May I see the Chronos Black Meridian in the center case?" Nora looked relieved to help. "Of course, sir." She reached for the case key. Caroline appeared beside her before the key entered the lock. "That piece is appointment only." Marcus looked at Caroline. "Is that store policy?" "For that model, yes." Nora hesitated. "Actually, Caroline, the listing says assisted viewing with identity log and staff handling." Caroline did not look at her. She kept her eyes on Marcus. "It is a very expensive piece." Marcus nodded. "I know." "The price is $186,000 before tax." "I know that too." A small silence opened. Tessa glanced over from Mrs. Harrow and smirked. Caroline tilted her head. "Are you looking to purchase today?" "I am looking to inspect before deciding." Inspect. The word bothered Caroline. Customers viewed, collectors considered. People who belonged in her store did not inspect unless they were appraisers, insurers, auditors, or lawyers. She should have listened to the word. Instead, she listened to her prejudice. "We take special precautions with limited editions," she said. "Good," Marcus answered. "Special pieces deserve careful handling." He said it calmly, but his eyes moved around the store as he spoke. Camera above case 4. Camera above the entrance. A blind spot near the side counter if a tray was angled too far left. Emergency exit behind the velvet curtain. Security guard near the door, too far from the case to see the handling. Tessa station within reach of the polishing drawer. Nora noticed him looking. Not like a thief, like a man reading the room. That unsettled her. Caroline turned to Tessa. "Bring the Meridian." Tessa looked surprised. "Now." Caroline's eyes warned her. "Yes, now." Tessa crossed to the center case and removed the watch with white gloves. She placed it on a black velvet tray, but not in the center of the camera view. The tray sat slightly angled, just enough that the main lens would catch Marcus' hands, but not fully catch Tessa right side. Marcus saw it. He said nothing. Nora saw it too. Her stomach tightened. She had watched Tessa do that before. Not always, only with certain clients. Clients Caroline called risk profiles. Clients with work jackets. Clients with accents. Clients who came alone. Clients who asked price before brand story. Clients whose clothes did not give Caroline permission to respect them. Marcus did not pick up the watch at first. "May I?" Tessa gave a little laugh. "That is why it is out." Marcus looked at her until the laugh died. Then he lifted the watch carefully, holding it by the edge of the strap, never turning his body away from the counter, never letting the piece leave the open space above the tray. He studied the dial, the bezel, the case back. The Black Meridian was beautiful. Deep black ceramic, a moon phase window at 6, a hand-finished movement visible beneath sapphire glass. He asked, "Is this number 23 of 75? Tessa blinked. Caroline's eyes narrowed. Nora looked at the inventory screen. Yes, Nora said. 23. Marcus nodded. The warranty card should have a factory service restriction on the first 2 years because of the movement coding. Tessa looked at Caroline. Caroline did not like needing Nora to confirm. Nora checked the record. That is correct. Marcus set the watch back on the tray. Careful, visible, untouched by haste. For a moment, Nora almost smiled. Then Mrs. Harrow laughed loudly near the front case and called Caroline over. Caroline looked annoyed at being pulled away from her suspicion. Tessa, stay with the tray. I am here, Tessa said. Caroline stepped away. Only 5 seconds. That was all it took. Tessa reached down as if to pick up the polishing cloth that had fallen from the counter. Her right hand dipped below the glass edge. The tray shifted. The watch slid out of view for less than a heartbeat. Marcus saw the motion in the reflection of the black stone floor. Nora saw Tessa's shoulder move. The main camera did not. When Tessa stood again, her face changed too quickly. Caroline, she said. Her voice trembled with practice. Caroline turned. What? Tessa looked down at the tray. The meridian. The tray was empty. The store stopped moving. Mrs. Harrow turned with her champagne. The security guard straightened by the door. Nora looked immediately under the tray. Caroline did not. She looked at Marcus, only at Marcus. Her face did not show surprise, it showed opportunity. Where is the watch? Caroline asked. Marcus said, I placed it back on the tray. Tessa shook her head. It was there a second ago. Marcus looked at Tessa. You were standing with it. Tessa's eyes widened. Do not pull me into this. Caroline stepped forward. Sir, do not move. Marcus remained still. I have not moved. Caroline looked at his satchel. Open the bag. No. A murmur passed through the store. Caroline's voice hardened. No. Marcus looked toward the cameras. Check your recording. We will check everything after we secure the situation. The situation is your accusation. Caroline lifted her voice. You stole that watch. The words hit the room like a glass case cracking. Nora whispered, Caroline. Caroline snapped, Not now. Marcus kept his hands visible. You just accused me of theft in front of your customers without checking your camera, your tray, your staff, or the floor. Caroline said, You were the last customer handling it. No, Marcus answered. I was the last customer allowed to touch it. That is not the same thing. Tessa looked away. That was the first crack. Nora saw it. Caroline did not want cracks. She wanted control. She turned to the guard. Lock the front door. The guard hesitated. Store policy says we should not lock customers inside unless there is immediate threat. Caroline stared at him. A $186,000 watch is missing. That is an immediate threat. The guard reached for the door control. The lock clicked. Marcus looked at Caroline. You are escalating a civil liability exposure inside your own showroom. Caroline laughed under her breath. Do not use legal words to scare me. I am not trying to scare you. Good. I am trying to make sure you understand the record you are creating. For the first time, Caroline hesitated, only for a second. Then pride stepped over caution. You people always think a calm voice makes you sound innocent. The sentence changed the air. No one breathed. Nora's face went pale. Even Tessa looked at Caroline quickly, as if she knew the words had gone too far. Marcus' eyes did not move. You people, he repeated. Caroline straightened. I mean people who come in here, touch pieces they cannot afford, and then act offended when professionals protect inventory. Mrs. Harrow lowered her glass. The security guard looked at the floor. Nora felt something inside herself step backward in shame. She knew this was wrong. She had known for weeks. She had watched Caroline ask extra questions of certain customers and call it profiling by risk. She had watched Tessa follow black clients between cases while laughing with white clients who opened cases with rings still on their fingers. She had watched complaints disappear into softened reports. She had heard Caroline say, "Better to offend one person than lose one watch." But now the offense had a face. Marcus Ellison stood in the center of the store with both hands open, being treated like guilt had entered with his coat. Caroline pointed toward the rear hall. "Back room." Marcus did not move. On what basis? "Internal loss prevention procedure." "Please state the procedure." Caroline narrowed her eyes. "You do not get to manage my investigation. You do not appear to have started one." Tessa said, "He is stalling." Caroline nodded. "Exactly." Marcus looked at Nora. "Miss Fields?" Nora startled. "You know my name." "Your badge." She touched it. Marcus said, "Is there a secondary camera angle on this counter?" Caroline stepped between them. "Do not speak to my staff." Marcus looked at her. "Someone should." The line landed quietly, but Nora felt it. Caroline turned to the guard. "Bring him back." The guard approached Marcus. "Sir, please come with us." Marcus looked at him. "Are you detaining me?" The guard swallowed. "We just need to ask questions." "Are you detaining me?" Caroline snapped. "Yes, until we recover our property." Marcus looked at the ceiling camera, then he nodded once. "Very well." He picked up his satchel slowly with 2 fingers and placed it on the counter. "I will not consent to an unlawful search. I will not sign any statement. I will not resist walking to the room if you are confirming on camera that I am being held against my objection."
Caroline smiled coldly. "Say whatever makes you feel important." Marcus followed the guard toward the rear hall. Customers watched. Nobody defended him. Not Mrs. Harrow, not the man with the champagne glass, not the couple near the bridal display, not the guard, not Nora. She hated herself for that last one, before the backroom door even closed. The rear security room was small and too bright. A metal table sat in the center. A monitor wall showed camera feeds from the sales floor, the entrance, the safe corridor, and the alley behind the store. One screen showed static for half a second, then returned to the watch counter from an angle Caroline had forgotten to disable. Marcus noticed. Caroline entered behind him with Tessa. The guard stayed at the door. Caroline placed a printed form on the table. Marcus read the title, "Customer Handling Incident Acknowledgement."
He almost closed his eyes. It was not an investigation form. It was a liability shield. The kind a bad business used when it wanted the customer to sign away dignity before the truth arrived. Caroline pushed a pen toward him. "If you cooperate, we may avoid involving police." Marcus looked at the form. "This says I mishandled merchandise. That is the simplest resolution. It is false." "Then give back the watch." Marcus looked at her. "You are asking me to confess to an event you have not proven happened." "I am asking you to be smart." "No," Marcus said. "You are asking me to be alone." For the first time since the accusation, Caroline had no immediate answer. Marcus sat across from her. His calm had a cost now. Nora was not there to see it, but his hands almost tightened under the table. He thought of his father. He had been 9 years old when his father took him into a small electronics store in Newark to buy a birthday radio for his mother. His father had come straight from work, wearing a maintenance uniform with his name sewn in blue thread. A shelf tag went missing from a boxed camera. A manager assumed his father had switched it. In front of his son, he made him empty his pockets. Keys, work gloves, bus pass, $9 in folded change. No camera tag. They found it later under the counter. The apology had been thin. His father walked Marcus home in silence. That night, he sat on the edge of Marcus' bed and said, "Son, the worst part was not that they thought I was poor. The worst part was that they thought poor meant guilty." Marcus had built a life around that sentence. Now, Caroline slid a false statement across the table, as if history had found a new suit to wear. He looked at the pen. No. Caroline leaned forward. "Then I call police." Before Marcus could answer, Nora appeared in the doorway. Her face was pale. Her tablet was in her hands. Caroline snapped. "What are you doing here?" Nora looked at Marcus, then at the monitor wall. Her voice shook. "We need to check camera 5. Caroline stood. "Get back on the floor." Nora did not move. Marcus watched her. This was the moment. Every toxic system eventually offered one person the chance to stop feeding it. Nora looked at the tablet. "I think camera 5 saw the tray." Tessa's face changed. Small. Fast. Marcus saw it. Caroline saw it too late. She turned toward Tessa. "What is she talking about?" Tessa whispered, "I do not know." The store phone rang outside. Once. Twice. Then the guard called through the door. "Ms. Whitmore, there is a woman here from Ellison Shield Insurance." Caroline froze. Marcus closed his eyes for one breath. Not in fear, in timing. The door opened wider. Elaine Porter stepped into the back hall, wearing a dark gray suit and carrying a black legal folder. Behind her stood a risk assessment specialist with a sealed evidence envelope and a tablet. Elaine looked past Caroline and directly at Marcus. "Mr. Ellison, are you all right?" Caroline slowly turned. "Mr. what?" Elaine's face was calm. "Marcus Ellison, Chief Executive Officer of Ellison Shield Insurance." The room went silent. Caroline looked at Marcus, then at the form on the table, then at the locked door, then at the camera screens. The man she had accused looked back at her with no smile at all. Marcus said, "Now we can review your procedure." "Now we can review your procedure." Marcus Ellison said it from the metal chair in the back security room. Still calm, still seated, still with the false acknowledgement form lying unsigned on the table before him. Caroline Whitmore stared at Elaine Porter as if the woman had brought winter into the room. Chief Executive Officer? The words had entered too late for Caroline to pretend she had treated Marcus with care. They stood between her and the locked door, between her and the customers outside, between her and every word she had said, when she believed Marcus had no power. Tessa Blake stood near the monitor wall with her arms folded too tightly. Nora Fields remained in the doorway, tablet in both hands, face pale but eyes awake now. The store was still silent outside. That silence had weight. But to understand why Marcus had not shouted his name the moment Caroline accused him, the story had to begin before the glass counters, before the missing watch, before the locked door. It began at 9:10 that morning in the 32nd floor conference room of Ellison Shield Insurance. The room overlooked lower Manhattan through tall windows washed in gray winter light. On the table sat a renewal file 3 inches thick. Langford timepieces, luxury inventory and civil liability policy. Policy renewal review, case number LT4793. Marcus stood at the window with a cup of black coffee cooling in his hand. He wore the same charcoal coat he would later wear into the store. No one in his office questioned the coat. No one in that room measured his worth by his shoes. Power changes what people notice. That had always bothered him. Elaine Porter sat at the conference table, already reading the renewal summary. She was counsel for Ellison Shield and one of the few people Marcus trusted to tell him when a profitable account was becoming dangerous. Across from her sat David Chen, senior risk analyst, with claim charts spread in front of him. The Langford account was large, $26 million in scheduled luxury inventory coverage across 5 stores. Civil liability protection for customer detention, security error, and employee misconduct. Business interruption coverage if a theft or investigation forced closure. Legal defense support for claims tied to employee action. The policy mattered more than most customers understood. Without it, Langford timepieces would not only lose protection against theft, it could violate lease conditions in 3 locations. It could trigger lender concern under its inventory credit facility. It could lose consignment privileges from 2 European watch houses that required proof of active insurance before releasing limited editions. Insurance was not just a shield, it was permission to keep operating. Marcus turned from the window. What changed? David pushed a chart forward. Small losses increased, but none of them are large enough alone to trigger alarm. Missing straps, missing warranty cards. 1 display model reported lost and recovered. 2 customer handling incidents closed without police report. 1 civil complaint threatened but withdrawn. Elaine looked over her glasses. Withdrawn after a customer signed a no-complaint acknowledgement? Marcus heard the phrase and set down his coffee. Who drafted the acknowledgement? Store management, not outside counsel. Elaine did not like that. Marcus did not either. David continued. There is also a pattern in customer complaints being recategorized. Several initial reports mention rude treatment or discriminatory service. Final reports soften it to customer misunderstanding or security sensitivity. Marcus opened the file. Caroline Whitmore name appeared again and again. Store manager, Madison Avenue flagship, top quarterly sales, lowest documented shrink rate, highest informal complaint noise. That last phrase came from a Langford internal email. Complaint noise. Marcus hated it immediately. People who called complaints noise were usually trying not to hear them. Elaine slid him another page. I flagged one more concern. Loss prevention training records show Caroline has local discretion over customer detention decisions for high-value pieces. Marcus looked up. Local discretion without counsel review. Yes. Who approved that? Victor Langford office. He trusts her because the flagship sells. Marcus looked at the window again. That was how bad systems survived. Revenue made people forgive things they would condemn if the numbers were weaker. David said, "We can renew with conditions." Marcus said nothing. Elaine watched him. You are thinking of going there. I am going there. Elaine closed the file slowly. As yourself. Marcus looked down at his bare wrist. As a customer. Elaine did not argue. She knew why. Marcus had built Ellison Shield after 2 decades in risk law, underwriting, litigation analysis, and luxury asset protection. He knew inventory. He knew civil liability. He knew how one wrongful detention could become a lawsuit large enough to make theft coverage look small. He knew a brand could survive a stolen watch more easily than it could survive proof that its security process targeted innocent people. But Marcus also knew something no actuarial chart could show, the sound of a father emptying his pockets in front of his son. He had been 9 years old when it happened, Newark, New Jersey, A Saturday evening in late November, his father, Daniel Ellison, had just finished a maintenance shift at a hospital. His uniform still carried the smell of disinfectant, metal tools, and tired work. He took Marcus into a small electronics store because Marcus's mother wanted a kitchen radio that could pick up old soul stations while she cooked. Daniel had saved for 3 weeks. He held the box carefully, checking the price tag twice. Marcus remembered the bright lights, the narrow aisles, the red sale stickers, the way his father smiled when he found the right model. Then, a manager noticed a missing price label from a camera box on another shelf. He looked at Daniel's uniform, then at the radio, then at Marcus. He did not ask what happened. He asked Daniel to open his pockets, in the middle of the store. Keys, work gloves, a bus pass, folded cash, a small screwdriver he forgot to leave in his locker. No label, no stolen item, no apology that deserved to be called one. The missing tag was later found under the counter, where an employee had swept it aside while restocking. The manager said, "Mistakes happen." Daniel picked up the radio, then put it back on the shelf. He took Marcus' hand and walked out. That night, Marcus sat on the edge of his bed, while his father loosened his work boots. Daniel did not sound angry. That made it worse. He said, "Son, the painful part was not that he thought I was poor. The painful part was that he thought poor meant guilty." Marcus never forgot that sentence. Years later, when he founded Ellison Shield, he wrote a line into the company training manual. Loss prevention must never become dignity prevention. Every new employee read it. Not everyone understood why the chief executive insisted on those exact words. Elaine did. That morning, she watched Marcus close the Langford file. "You want to know if Caroline Whitmore is using insurance language to cover prejudice?" Marcus nodded. "And if Victor Langford is ignoring the warning because the store looks profitable?" Elaine said, "I will be 10 minutes away." Marcus picked up his satchel. "Make it 20. She narrowed her eyes. "Marcus, I want to see the store before it knows it is being seen." He placed his father's fountain pen into the satchel. The pen no longer wrote smoothly. Its black barrel was scratched near the cap. Daniel Ellison had bought it from a pawn shop when Marcus passed the bar exam and told him that some men used pens to sign "doors open," while others used them to sign people away. Marcus carried it on inspections that felt personal. This one already did. At 1:48, Marcus walked 3 blocks through cold wind toward Madison Avenue. He passed bright windows, locked doors, doormen in heavy coats, and shoppers carrying bags that cost more than his father's first car. He stopped outside Langford timepieces before entering. The display window showed a gold watch turning slowly on a motorized stand. A card beneath it read, "Precision is trust." Marcus almost smiled. Trust was easy to print under glass, harder to practice when nobody important was watching. Inside the store, Caroline had spent the morning training her staff in the language of suspicion. She did not call it suspicion, she called it standards. Nora Fields stood behind the service counter with a notebook hidden beneath the register drawer. She had started keeping it after her 4th week. At first, she wrote product questions, strap sizes, warranty terms, inventory codes. Then the notes changed. Customer asked for price before brand history. Tessa followed him for 12 minutes. Black couple asked to view anniversary watch. Caroline requested second identification. Camera 4 offline during Meridian showing. Tessa had tray. Complaint from Mr. Alvarez recategorized as customer agitation. Email subject line. Tighten risk language before Victor review. Nora did not know what to do with the notes. She only knew that not writing them down felt like helping the lie. Caroline caught her once and asked what she was writing. Nora said, "Training notes." Caroline smiled. Good, write this down. The best way to prevent loss is to recognize who does not belong before they touch anything. Nora wrote the sentence. Then she circled it later in the break room with her hand shaking. Who does not belong? That was not policy. That was Caroline. Tessa Blake learned faster than Nora because Tessa wanted Caroline approval more than she wanted the truth. She had a talent for laughing at the right moments, whispering the right warnings, and making customers feel judged without saying enough to be written up. Caroline called her sharp. Tessa liked that. For months, small items had gone missing, or nearly missing, on Tessa shifts. Never enough to shock the system, always enough to justify Caroline's fear. A strap from a service tray, a warranty card, a travel pouch. One display model that disappeared for 7 minutes, then turned up beneath the polishing drawer after a customer signed a no-complaint form and left embarrassed. Caroline reported these as customer handling events. Tessa always looked worried at the right time. Nora always noticed too late. But the pattern stayed in her notebook. At 2:13, Marcus entered. The bell chimed. Caroline judged. Nora noticed. Tessa prepared the tray, and the store began walking toward the moment it had built for months. Now, in the back security room, all those months seemed to stand behind Nora. Marcus sat with the false acknowledgement form before him. Elaine stood beside him. Caroline tried to recover the room. "This has been a misunderstanding," she said. Marcus looked at her. "No, a misunderstanding is when two people lack information. You refused information." Caroline stiffened. "We had a missing asset." "You had a missing watch on a tray controlled by your staff. The customer handled it and returned it. You claim that." Marcus looked at Nora. "Miss Fields says there is another camera angle." Caroline turned. "Nora, leave the tablet on the table and return to the floor." Nora's hands tightened. Elaine spoke. "No one will remove that tablet. Not now." Caroline faced Elaine. "This is store property." Elaine opened her legal folder. "This is potential evidence in a wrongful detention and policy compliance review. Any deletion, alteration, or coercive retrieval attempt will be documented." The word documented struck the room harder than shouted anger. Tessa shifted near the monitors. Marcus saw it. Caroline saw it too, but she still believed she could command fear back into place. "Nora," she said slowly, "think very carefully about your job." Nora's eyes filled. There it was, the threat beneath the training. Marcus leaned forward. "Miss Fields, fear is not proof that you are wrong. Sometimes fear is the price a bad system charges for telling the truth." Nora looked at him. For a second, her face looked like someone standing at the edge of deep water. Then she placed the tablet on the table. "Camera 5 saved to local backup when the main display refreshed," she said. Caroline forgot that the rear angle remains active if the service monitor is logged in. Caroline whispered, "Nora?" Nora shook her head. "No." It was the smallest word, and the largest thing she had done in 11 weeks. Elaine connected the tablet to the security room monitor. The video opened. At first it showed only the sales floor from behind the side counter. The angle was high and slightly distorted. Marcus stood at the counter with the watch in his hand. Tessa stood opposite him. Caroline was visible near Mrs. Harrow. Marcus placed the black meridian back on the tray. Clear, visible, careful. Nora exhaled. The video continued. Tessa glanced at Caroline. Then she reached down, pretending to retrieve the polishing cloth. Her right hand slid the watch under the counter and into the towel drawer beneath the register ledge. When she stood, the tray was empty. Everything froze. Tessa began crying before anyone spoke. That told Marcus the truth had been waiting close to the surface. Caroline turned on her. "What did you do?" Tessa sobbed. "You told me to get him out." "I told you to manage risk. You said if he did not buy, make him leave. You said we could not have that look near Meridian clients." Caroline's face drained. Elaine said, "We will need the message." Tessa shook her head. Marcus watched Caroline. That look. He did not raise his voice. "What look, Miss Whitmore?" Caroline said nothing. The same silence that had greeted him at the front door now returned to her. Elaine looked at Tessa. "Where's the watch now?" Tessa pointed with a shaking hand. "The towel drawer." The security guard left the room and returned 30 seconds later with the Chronos Black Meridian sealed in a clear evidence pouch. He placed it on the table and stepped back as if the watch itself had become dangerous. Marcus did not look relieved. That surprised Nora. An innocent man had just been proven innocent, and still his face looked heavy. Because the watch was not the whole crime. The accusation was. The locked door was. The form on the table was. The customers watching was. The way Caroline had looked at his coat and decided the story before the evidence arrived was. Elaine picked up the false acknowledgement form. "Who prepared this?" Caroline said. "Standard store form." Elaine looked at the heading. Customer Handling Incident Acknowledgement. She turned one page. "This asks the customer to agree that merchandise was mishandled and waive further complaint." Caroline said, "It is a de-escalation tool." Marcus looked at her. "A forced confession is not de-escalation." Caroline snapped, "You were never forced." The locked door clicked again as the guard shifted behind them. Everyone heard it. Marcus looked toward the door. "Were we not?" Caroline swallowed. Elaine placed the form into a second evidence envelope. At that moment, the risk assessment specialist stepped into the room with his tablet. "Marcus, Victor Langford is on video." Caroline's eyes widened. "Victor?" Elaine nodded. "Call him in." The monitor changed from camera footage to a live video call. Victor Langford appeared from a wood-paneled office, silver-haired, wearing a blue suit, and the confused expression of a man who had not yet understood how expensive his trust in Caroline was about to become. Elaine spoke first. "Mr. Langford, this is Elaine Porter, counsel for Ellison Shield Insurance. We are at your Madison Avenue flagship. Your store manager detained Marcus Ellison after accusing him of stealing a $186,000 Chronos Black Meridian. The watch has been recovered from a staff drawer after video showed a sales associate concealing it." Victor stared. "Marcus Ellison." Marcus looked at the screen. "Good afternoon, Victor." Victor's face went pale. Caroline whispered, "Mr. Langford, I can explain." Victor did not look at her. "Why was Mr. Ellison in a back room?" Marcus answered, "Because your manager accused me in front of customers, locked the front door, brought me here, attempted to search my bag, and tried to make me sign a statement admitting mishandling before reviewing the full camera record." Victor closed his eyes. When he opened them, he looked older. Elaine added, "We are also preserving video, the false acknowledgement form, message records, and prior incident logs. This is now a policy compliance matter." Victor whispered, "Caroline, tell me you called police before detaining him." Caroline hesitated. "No." "Tell me you reviewed camera first." "No." "Tell me legal approved that form." She said nothing. Victor looked away from the screen for 1 second. That was when Caroline understood. She had not only humiliated a customer, she had endangered the policy that kept the store alive. Marcus stood at last. For the first time since entering the back room, he picked up his satchel. He opened it slowly and removed the sealed inspection note. The Ellison Shield logo sat at the top. Langford Timepieces Renewal Site Review. He placed it beside the recovered watch. The watch was beautiful. The report was plain. One had been protected with glass, light, locks, and accusation. The other carried the power to decide whether the store could still be trusted. Marcus looked at Caroline. "You thought the risk walked in wearing my coat." Then he looked at Victor. "It was already behind your counter." Marcus Ellison did not say it loudly. He did not have to. The Chronos Black Meridian lay inside the clear evidence pouch on the metal table, its black ceramic case catching the harsh security room light. Less than 10 minutes earlier, Caroline Whitmore had turned that watch into a weapon. Now it sat between them like a witness that could not be coached. Victor Langford stared from the video screen. Caroline stood beside the table, pale now, but not defeated. People like Caroline did not surrender when truth arrived. They tried to rename it. "This is being exaggerated," she said. Elaine Porter looked at her. A customer was accused of theft, locked inside the store, taken to a back room, and handed a false acknowledgement form before the full camera record was reviewed. Caroline lifted her chin. "A limited edition watch was missing. My duty was to protect inventory." Marcus looked at her. "Your duty was to protect inventory without stealing dignity." The words struck Nora Fields harder than Caroline. Nora stood near the monitor wall with her tablet still connected. Her fingers were cold. The video of Tessa hiding the watch had stopped on the screen, frozen at the exact frame where Tessa's hand slid beneath the counter. That single frame had changed everything. But Nora knew it was not everything. There were more frames, more notes, more emails, more customers who had walked out with humiliation folded inside them because no one wanted to risk a job by saying Caroline was wrong. Victor's voice came through the speaker. "Caroline, did you instruct Tessa to move the watch?" "No," Tessa sobbed. "You told me to create pressure." Caroline snapped. "That is not the same thing." Tessa pointed at Marcus with a trembling finger. "You said if he asked too many questions and did not buy, we should get him out before the Meridian clients came in." Marcus' eyes remained on Caroline. Meridian clients. Caroline swallowed. "Collectors. White collectors," Nora said quietly. Everyone turned. Nora looked shocked by her own voice. Then, because silence had already cost too much, she continued. "That is what Caroline calls them when she thinks no one will write it down. Meridian clients means the clients she believes make the store look exclusive." Caroline glared at her. "Nora, you are emotional." Nora looked at the tablet. "No, I am late." That sentence changed her. Marcus saw it. A person who admitted she was late to the truth could still arrive. Elaine looked to Nora. "Miss Fields, do you have records relevant to prior incidents?" Nora hesitated. Caroline's voice dropped. "Think carefully." Marcus spoke before fear could finish its work. "Miss Fields, a threat loses power when the room can hear it." Nora breathed in. "Yes, I have records." Caroline laughed bitterly. "Training notes from the new employee are not evidence." Elaine answered, "They may lead us to evidence." Victor leaned closer to his screen. "Nora, show them." Caroline turned toward the screen. "Victor, with respect, this is not how internal review works." Victor's face hardened. "Caroline, I trusted your internal review. That is why my insurance carrier is sitting in your back room with a detained chief executive officer." The room went silent. For the first time, Victor sounded less confused than angry. Not loud. Worse. Awake. Nora opened a folder on her tablet labeled Store Training Notes. Her hand shook as she selected the first document. The monitor changed. A list appeared. March 3rd. Customer Alvarez asked why security hold fee was added. Caroline told Tessa to mark him as agitated. March 19th. Camera 4 offline during showing. Tessa had tray. Watch later found under polishing drawer. April 2nd. Black couple requested anniversary watch. Caroline asked for second identification, although profile was already verified. April 14th. Email subject line, tighten risk language before Victor review. April 29th. Tessa told me Caroline prefers main camera angle blocked during uncomfortable clients. Tessa covered her face. Caroline said, "These are accusations without context." Elaine turned to the risk specialist. "David, preserve the tablet image." David Chen stepped forward with a small evidence label and a portable drive. Caroline blocked him. "You are not taking company property." Elaine's voice stayed calm. "We are not taking it. We are preserving a forensic copy with witness acknowledgement. Any refusal will be included in the policy compliance report." Policy compliance. That phrase made Caroline step back. Because that was the world Marcus controlled. Not the showroom, not the champagne tray, not the silent customers. The policy. The thing under the beautiful surface that told banks, landlords, brands, and consignment partners that Langford Timepieces was safe enough to trust with expensive things. Marcus turned toward the monitor showing Victor. "Victor, I need you to listen carefully. This is no longer only about whether I was falsely accused. It is about whether Langford has been misreporting loss events, customer detentions, employee misconduct, and internal shrink." Victor closed his eyes for a second. "I understand." Caroline said, "You do not understand. This store moves high-value merchandise every hour. Decisions have to be made fast. If we hesitate, we lose inventory." Marcus looked at the watch in the evidence pouch. "You hesitated to check the camera. You did not hesitate to accuse me." Caroline's mouth closed. Elaine lifted the false acknowledgement form. "Miss Whitmore, how many customers have signed this form in the past 12 months? Caroline said nothing. Victor asked, "Caroline?" "I do not know the exact number." Elaine said, "Estimate." Caroline looked toward Tessa. Tessa whispered, 7. The word dropped into the room. 7. Marcus turned to Tessa. 7 people signed a form like this after being accused. Tessa cried harder. Some were not accused, some were just handling issues. Elaine asked, "Were police reports filed?" "No." "Were incident reports sent to Ellison Shield?" Caroline said, "Not all incidents rise to carrier notice." Marcus leaned forward. "Did any of those customers later complain?" Caroline did not answer. Nora did. "Yes." Caroline spun around. Nora continued. 3 complained by email. 2 called the store. 1 man came back with his daughter and asked for the security footage. Caroline said footage had expired. Elaine asked, "Had it expired?" Nora looked down. "No, it was still in the system then." Everything froze. Victor Langford whispered something away from the microphone. Marcus looked at the monitor wall. Caroline had made one mistake with him, but with others she had built a method. Accuse fast, isolate, pressure. Offer a quiet exit. Record it as customer handling. Protect inventory numbers. Protect reputation. Protect Caroline. Tessa wiped her face. "She made us think it was normal," Tessa said. Caroline snapped, "Do not pretend you were innocent." Tessa looked up. "I am not." That admission stunned Caroline more than denial would have. Tessa continued, "I liked being the one you trusted. I liked when you said I had instincts. I liked not being treated like Nora, always corrected for caring about process. But I did what you asked because I wanted your approval. She pointed to the evidence pouch. I hid it. I hid the watch. But I did not make this culture alone. Caroline said, "You are blaming me to save yourself." Tessa whispered, "Yes." And telling the truth for the first time, the room held that. Truth could begin selfishly. It could still reveal what lies it hidden. Marcus turned to the security guard. "Your name?" The guard straightened. "Andre Mills." "Mr. Mills, who instructed you to lock the front door?" "Ms. Whitmore, did you believe there was immediate threat?" Andre looked at Caroline, then at Marcus. "No, sir. I believed there was a missing watch and she wanted no one leaving." "Did store policy allow you to lock all customers inside during a suspected loss?" Andre swallowed. "Not unless there is active violence, immediate danger, or police instruction." Elaine wrote that down. Marcus asked, "Why did you do it?" Andre looked ashamed. "Because she writes my schedule." Nora closed her eyes. There it was again. Power was not always a shout. Sometimes it was the shift calendar. Marcus looked at Caroline. "You turned employment into leverage." Caroline's voice sharpened. "Every manager uses authority. Authority is not the same as fear." Caroline laughed. "Easy to say when you own the policy." Marcus stood. "No, Miss Whitmore, it was hard to learn before I owned anything." The room quieted. He reached into his satchel and removed his father's fountain pen. The black barrel was scratched near the cap. The metal clip had dulled with age. It looked small in his hand compared with the watch on the table. Marcus looked at the pen. "When I was 9, my father was accused in a store because a manager thought his work uniform made him suspicious. They made him empty his pockets in front of me. Keys, gloves, bus pass, folded cash, nothing else. They found the missing tag under their own counter." He looked up. "My father put back the gift he came to buy because he said he would not reward a place that made innocence feel like begging." No one spoke. Caroline looked away first. Marcus continued. "I did not build an insurance company because I wanted to protect glass cases better than people. I built it because businesses always claim they are protecting property when what they are really protecting is the right to decide whose dignity can be risked." Victor lowered his head on the screen. Nora wiped a tear with the back of her hand. Marcus placed the pen beside the evidence pouch. "That pen signed our first policy. It also reminds me that paper can either protect people or trap them." He touched the false acknowledgement form. This paper was a trap. Elaine said, "We need Victor physically present." Victor nodded. "I am leaving now, 15 minutes. Caroline turned. "Victor, do not make a decision while emotions are high." Marcus answered, "This is not emotion, it is exposure." Victor looked at Caroline through the screen. "Do not touch any record. Do not speak to staff without counsel present. Do not remove product. Do not close camera access." Caroline's face tightened. "You are treating me like a criminal." Victor said, "No, I am treating this like a business that may have lied to the people insuring it." The call ended. The screen went black. Caroline seemed smaller without Victor's face there to manipulate, but she was not finished. She turned to Marcus. "You came here looking for trouble." Marcus said, "I came here looking for truth." "You came dressed like that on purpose." Marcus looked down at his coat. "Dressed like what?" Caroline knew the question had a trap inside it. She did not answer. Marcus stepped closer. "Say it." Caroline held his gaze. "You came without the signals this store uses to understand risk." There it was. Not an apology, a confession dressed as policy. Elaine repeated it as she wrote. "Without the signals this store uses to understand risk." Marcus asked, What signals? Caroline's lips tightened. Purchase history, client profile, presentation, behavior, and skin. Caroline said nothing. Marcus did not need her to. Nora whispered, "Sometimes." The word was almost too soft. Marcus heard it. "Tell me." Nora gripped the tablet. Customers of color were watched more closely. Some were asked for identification after profile verification. Some were told pieces were appointment only when the system said assisted viewing. Caroline called it practical. Caroline said, "Because high-value theft rings use distraction." Marcus nodded. "Yes, theft rings exist. That is why real procedure matters. But you did not use behavior, you used appearance. You did not investigate facts, you searched for someone who fit your suspicion." Caroline said, "You cannot prove that." Elaine looked at Nora. "Miss Fields, do you have the message Tessa referenced?" Nora opened another folder. "I have screenshots." Caroline sometimes deleted texts, but Tessa forwarded one to me by mistake when asking what she should say in the closing report. Tessa nodded weakly. "I did." The screenshot appeared on the monitor, from Caroline. "If he does not buy, make him leave. We cannot have that look near Meridian clients." Below it, Tessa had replied, "Pressure or service refusal?" Caroline had written back, "Pressure first. If he reacts, we have cause." The room went cold. Even Caroline did not speak, because there was no professional language left to hide inside. Marcus read the final line twice. "If he reacts, we have cause." He understood that kind of trap better than most. Make a person afraid, make a person angry, then call their reaction proof that suspicion was justified. He looked at Andre. "Did I react?" Andre looked at him. "No, sir." "Did I raise my voice?" "No, sir." "Did I attempt to leave?" "No, sir." "Did I threaten anyone?" "No, sir." Caroline snapped. He knew exactly how to behave. Marcus turned back to her. "Yes." He let the word stand. "I learned young. That answer did not sound like victory. It sounded like survival." Nora looked down at the floor. She was thinking of all the customers who had not known how to behave under insult, the ones who had gotten angry, the ones who had said, "This is not fair," the ones Caroline had labeled agitated. Elaine placed the screenshots into the evidence file. David Chen finished the tablet image and sealed the drive. At 3:07, Victor Langford entered the store through the front door. The bell chimed softly. No one greeted him. The customers had been asked to remain available as witnesses or provide contact information. Mrs. Harrow sat near the front display, pale and quiet. The man with the champagne glass had stopped pretending not to listen. Two younger shoppers whispered by the door, looking at Marcus with the guilt of people who had believed an accusation too quickly. Victor walked into the back room without his coat fully removed. He looked at the watch in the pouch, then the form, then Marcus, then Nora, then Caroline. "I need the room," he said. Elaine answered, "Staff witnesses remain unless counsel directs otherwise." Victor nodded. "Then let them remain." Caroline said, "Victor, please." He turned to her. "How many complaint reports did you soften before sending summaries to my office?" Caroline's mouth opened. He continued, "How many customer detention events were closed without legal review? How many missing item events involved Tessa? How many times did you use that form?" Caroline whispered, "I protected your store." Victor looked around the security room, the monitor wall, the false form, the recovered watch, the chief executive officer his manager had detained. "No," he said. "You protected the illusion that my store was safer than it was." Caroline's eyes filled, but even her tears looked disciplined. "Victor, my sales carried this flagship." Marcus looked at Victor. "There is the choice." Victor turned to him. Marcus said, "Every owner reaches it eventually. Do you protect the numbers that hid the risk or the truth that can still save the business?" Victor said nothing. Nora held her tablet. Andre stood by the door. Tessa cried silently. Caroline watched Victor like her whole career rested inside his next breath. Victor took that breath slowly. "Caroline Whitmore, you are suspended effective immediately, pending independent investigation. You will surrender keys, system access, inventory codes, and communication devices used for store business. You will not contact staff or customers involved in this matter." Caroline stared. "You cannot do this in front of them." Victor's voice hardened. "You did worse to him in front of customers." That sentence crossed the room and stopped at Marcus. Not enough, but not nothing. Elaine turned to Marcus. "Policy review." Marcus looked at the watch, then at his father's pen, then at Nora, whose fear had finally found a voice. "Not yet," he said. Caroline's eyes lifted, hoping. Marcus looked at her. "I want every record opened first." Her hope died. He turned to Victor. "Inventory loss logs, complaint files, camera outage reports, customer acknowledgement forms, employee schedules after internal objections. All branch reports where Caroline procedures were copied." Victor nodded. "You will have them." Marcus said, "Today." Victor answered, "Today." Elaine opened a new folder and placed a formal preservation notice on the table. The title was simple: Notice of Policy Compliance Review and Record Hold. Caroline stared at it. A policy could protect a store? It could also expose one. And now, every drawer Caroline had kept closed was about to be opened. Elaine Porter placed the formal preservation notice beside the evidence pouch that held the Chronos Black Meridian. The watch looked almost innocent now. Black ceramic, moon phase window, $186,000 in polished silence. 20 minutes earlier, Caroline Whitmore had treated it like the most important thing in the building. She had locked a door for it. She had accused a man for it. She had tried to make him sign away his own dignity for it. Now the watch sat on the table while the people around it finally understood something far more expensive had been damaged. Trust. Victor Langford stood inside the back security room, coat still open, face pale under the fluorescent lights. He owned 5 Langford timepieces stores, but in that moment, he looked like a man who had just discovered he had been renting his reputation from people he had never truly watched. Marcus Ellison stood across from him, with his father's fountain pen resting beside the false acknowledgement form. Elaine opened her folder. Policy number ESILT 88420. Langford Timepieces Luxury Inventory, Theft, Civil Liability, Employee Misconduct, and Business Interruption Coverage. Renewal pending final compliance review. She looked at Victor. This review is now adverse. Caroline gripped the edge of the table. Adverse. Elaine nodded. Yes. Victor closed his eyes briefly. Caroline turned toward him. Victor, this is one incident, one bad moment. We recovered the watch. Nothing was stolen. Marcus looked at the recovered watch. No property was stolen by me. Then he looked at Caroline. But you tried to steal the truth before anyone could find it. Caroline's face tightened. That is dramatic. Marcus said, No, dramatic was locking the front door. Andre Mills, the security guard, shifted by the doorway. Marcus looked at him. Mr. Mills, did Miss Whitmore instruct you to lock the front door before reviewing the camera? Andre swallowed. Yes, sir. Were customers still inside? Yes, sir. Was there any physical threat? No, sir. Was I attempting to leave? No, sir. Elaine wrote each answer. The pen made a soft scratching sound across the page. Caroline snapped. He is making me look reckless by ignoring context. Elaine looked up. Then give us the context. Caroline opened her mouth. No useful words came. Because the context had already been recorded. The missing watch, the ignored camera, the locked door, the false form, the message on the screen. If he reacts, we have cause. Victor looked at that line again. It was still displayed on the monitor from Nora's tablet. The words seemed uglier every time he read them. If he reacts, we have cause. Victor whispered, Caroline, what did you mean by that? Caroline stared at the screen. I meant if he became aggressive. Marcus asked, Did I become aggressive? No. Did you expect me to? Caroline did not answer. Marcus stepped closer, not enough to intimidate, only enough to remove escape from the question. Did you hope I would? Caroline's eyes flashed. That is not fair. Nora Fields spoke from beside the monitor. It is what happened before. Everyone turned. Nora held her tablet against her chest, the way someone might hold a shield. She continued. Customers got upset after being followed or accused. Then the report said, customer became agitated. It made the suspicion look justified after the store created the reaction. Caroline stared at her. Nora, stop. Nora shook her head. No. The word was still small, but this time it did not tremble. Elaine asked, Do you have examples? Nora nodded. She opened another folder. The screen filled with 3 incident summaries. Mr. Alvarez, Mrs. Patrice Coleman, Dr. Andre Wallace. Nora said, All 3 asked to view high-value pieces. All 3 were watched closely. All 3 were accused of unusual handling. All 3 were asked to sign a customer handling acknowledgement. In 2 cases, the item was later found in store storage. In 1 case, the strap was logged as missing, but the replacement strap was later located in the service drawer. Victor looked at the names. I never saw these reports. Caroline said, They were closed locally. Elaine turned to him.
Under your policy, any customer detention, accusation of theft, or signed liability acknowledgement tied to alleged merchandise handling should have been reported to carrier compliance within 48 hours. Victor looked at Caroline. Were they? Caroline said, The incidents were resolved. Marcus answered, Resolved for the store, not for the people accused. Silence. Marcus looked at Victor. That is the danger. A business can teach itself that an event is over when the embarrassed customer leaves. But liability does not leave with them, neither does harm. Victor lowered his head. Elaine changed the screen to the policy compliance section. Clause 7.2, Truthful Loss Reporting. Clause 8.4, Customer Detention Protocol. Clause 11.6, Non-discrimination and equal service obligation. Clause 12.3, Video preservation for high-value merchandise incidents. Clause 14.5, Employee misconduct and internal concealment. Clause 16.1, Carrier right to withdraw renewal approval, issue non-renewal, or cancel where allowed by law, after material breach or increased moral hazard. Caroline stared at the words. Moral hazard. She gave a cold laugh. Now I am a moral hazard? Marcus said, You created one. Elaine read from the policy. The insured must maintain procedures reasonably designed to prevent wrongful detention, discriminatory enforcement, coercive customer waivers, and concealment of internal loss or employee misconduct. Failure to do so may materially increase civil liability, reputational exposure, and theft risk. She lowered the page. This store has breached multiple conditions. Victor rubbed one hand across his mouth. Caroline said, "You cannot cancel a policy over a misunderstanding." Marcus turned to her. "Stop calling it a misunderstanding." His voice did not rise. That made the room colder. "You understood exactly what you were doing when you told Tessa to create pressure. You understood when you locked the door. You understood when you slid that form across the table. You understood when you told Nora to think carefully about her job." Caroline looked away. Marcus continued. "What you misunderstood was who would be forced to carry the consequence." Tessa began crying again. "I did not think it would go this far." Marcus looked at her. "It went this far the moment you touched the watch and let another person be accused." Tessa nodded through tears. Yes. No one comforted her. The truth needed space before pity could enter. Elaine looked at Victor. "Mr. Langford, we need immediate access to all customer handling acknowledgement forms from the last 24 months. Victor nodded. "You will have them. All camera outage logs." "Yes." "All internal loss reports and revised versions." "Yes." "All messages between Caroline Whitmore, Tessa Blake, and store staff regarding Meridian clients, risk profiles, pressure, loss language, fee disputes, detentions, and customer complaints." Caroline said, "My personal messages are private." Elaine answered, "Messages involving store business on company devices or used to conduct store operations are subject to review." Caroline looked at Victor. He did not rescue her. That was when she fully understood she had lost him. Victor said, "Caroline, surrender your store phone and access badge." She stared. "Right now." "Yes." Her voice lowered. "After everything I did for this flagship?" Victor looked at the evidence pouch. "After everything you did to it." Caroline flinched as if slapped, but no one had touched her. That was the strange fairness of accountability. It could hurt without violence because it returned words to the person who had used them carelessly. Caroline reached into her jacket and placed the store phone on the table, then her badge, then the small key fob for the display cases. Tessa looked at the key fob as it landed. For years, that sound had meant access. Now, it meant loss. Victor turned to Tessa. "You will surrender your devices and leave the sales floor under escort pending investigation." Tessa cried, "I will cooperate." Elaine said, "Cooperation should begin with truth, not panic." Tessa nodded, "I know." Marcus looked toward Nora. "Miss Fields, were you ever instructed to alter reports?" Nora took a breath. "Yes." Caroline said, "She is lying." Nora opened an email. Subject line, "Clean up customer language before renewal review." Sent by Caroline at 8:27 the previous evening. Nora read it aloud. "Remove emotional phrasing. Do not use accused, use merchandise concern. Do not mention customer race, even if staff included it in notes. Keep renewal file clean." Victor seemed to age in front of them. Elaine looked at the email. "That was yesterday." Nora nodded, "Before the renewal visit." Marcus looked at Caroline. "You knew Ellison Shield was reviewing the policy." Caroline said, "Every store prepares for audits, by deleting truth, by tightening language." Marcus looked at Victor. "This is why surprise reviews matter." Victor said quietly, "I understand that now." Marcus said, "Understanding after exposure is not the same as governance before harm." The sentence entered Victor like a weight. He did not argue. That mattered. Elaine placed a second notice on the table. Notice of withdrawal of renewal approval pending formal non-renewal and cancellation review. Caroline went still. Victor looked at Elaine. "You are withdrawing approval today?" Elaine said, "The carrier is withdrawing renewal approval immediately. A formal notice of non-renewal or cancellation, to the extent permitted under the policy terms and governing law, will be sent after full review. Current operations may be subject to immediate underwriting restrictions." Victor's face tightened. "What restrictions?" Marcus answered, "No new high-value limited edition events without carrier review. No customer detention unless legal protocol is met. No employee involved in this incident may handle merchandise or customer reports. All prior incident records preserved. Independent investigation required. Camera controls removed from local store management. Written notice to relevant consignment partners that compliance review is active." Victor took a slow breath. "Without renewal approval, our bank will ask questions." "Yes, our Madison lease requires active coverage." "Yes, Geneva Meridian will pause consignment." "Probably." Caroline whispered, "You are destroying us." Marcus looked at her. "No, we are refusing to ensure a fire you keep calling candlelight." The room went silent. Victor looked at the watch, then at Marcus. "What path exists?" Caroline looked up, desperate. Marcus did not answer quickly. That made the question real.
A path may exist after independent investigation, full inventory audit, customer remediation, staff protection, camera integrity review, revised detention protocol, and evidence that leadership will no longer hide discrimination inside loss prevention language. Victor nodded. Caroline said, "So I am just sacrificed." Nora spoke before Marcus could. "No, the customers were sacrificed." Caroline turned. Nora's voice grew stronger. "Mr. Alvarez, Mrs. Coleman, Dr. Wallace, Mr. Ellison, everyone you treated like a problem to make reports cleaner. They were sacrificed." Caroline said, "You were part of it. You stood there." Nora took the hit. "Yes." The word made the room quiet. Nora continued, "I stood there too long. I wrote notes instead of reporting them. I told myself I was new. I told myself I needed the job. I told myself someone else would stop it." Her eyes filled, but she did not look away. "I was wrong." Marcus watched her closely. This was not a perfect hero speech. It was better. It was responsibility. Victor said, "Nora." She looked at him. He continued, "You will be protected from retaliation. You will report directly to outside counsel during the review." Nora nodded, but her face showed she did not yet know how to trust protection. Elaine wrote that down. Marcus turned to Andre. "Mr. Mills, you too. Your statement and schedule records will be preserved." Andre exhaled, almost silently. "Thank you, sir." Victor looked toward the sales floor. "What about the customers outside?" Marcus answered, "You tell them enough truth to stop the lie from continuing." Victor swallowed. Then he opened the security room door. The showroom beyond it looked different now. The glass cases were still beautiful. The lights still shone cold and white. The black floor still reflected wealth like water. But the customers no longer looked relaxed. They looked like witnesses. Mrs. Harrow stood near the front case. The man with the champagne glass held it untouched. A young couple by the bridal display whispered to each other, then went quiet when Victor stepped out. Victor stood in the center of the store. His voice shook once, then steadied. "Ladies and gentlemen, an accusation was made in this store today before proper review. The customer accused has been cleared by video evidence. The merchandise has been recovered inside our own service area. We are preserving records and cooperating with Ellison Shield Insurance in a full compliance review." A woman near the back whispered, "He did not steal it." The words moved through the store. He did not steal it. He did not steal it. Marcus stood in the rear hallway, not stepping forward to perform victory. He did not need applause from people who had watched him be taken away. But he needed the lie corrected in the same air where it had been spoken. Victor turned toward him. "Mr. Ellison, I apologize publicly for what happened in my store." Marcus looked at him. "Start there." Victor nodded. "Then do more."
"I will." Marcus stepped into the showroom. He looked at the customers, then at the staff, then at Nora, then at Caroline, who stood behind him with no badge, no phone, no keys, and no command left in her voice. Marcus said, "The problem was not that a store protected an expensive watch.
A store should protect its property. The problem was that protection became permission to decide who deserved humiliation before evidence. The room stayed silent. He continued, "Loss prevention without dignity becomes another kind of theft." Nora lowered her head. Andre did too. Caroline stared at the floor. Elaine handed Victor the official notice. Victor signed receipt at 3:29 in the afternoon. Time mattered. Ink mattered. Witnesses mattered. 20 minutes after Caroline told Marcus, "You stole that watch," her own store had signed a notice confirming the insurance carrier no longer trusted the system she controlled. The Black Meridian was returned to the safe. Caroline was escorted to the office to surrender remaining credentials. Tessa was placed under investigation. The security video was preserved. The false form was sealed as evidence. The policy renewal was withdrawn, and Marcus Ellison picked up his father's fountain pen from the metal table before leaving the back room. He held it for one extra second. A small black pen, scratched, old, worth almost nothing in a store full of watches. But it had signed the first promise he ever made in business: protect property. Never at the cost of stealing a person's dignity. As he walked toward the front door, Caroline finally spoke. "Mr. Ellison." He stopped. She looked smaller now, but smaller was not the same as sorry. "If I had known who you were," she said, "this would never have happened." Marcus turned. "That is exactly why the policy is gone." Caroline stared at him. He continued, "You should not need to know a man is powerful before you treat him as innocent." Then Marcus walked out of Langford Timepieces into the cold Madison Avenue air. Behind him, the door chime sounded soft and expensive. Inside, the store remained open for another hour, but everyone knew the truth. The thing that protected Langford had already left. Not the watch, not the glass. Trust. Marcus Ellison stepped out onto Madison Avenue with the cold wind pressing against his charcoal coat. Behind him, Langford Timepieces still shone under its perfect white lights. The watches still turned slowly beneath glass. The brass sign near the entrance still promised trust to collectors worldwide. But promises on brass do not matter when a customer has just been locked in a back room. Elaine Porter walked beside him, holding the sealed evidence folder under one arm. "Are you all right?" she asked. Marcus looked at the traffic sliding past the curb. "I am thinking about my father." Elaine did not need him to explain. She knew the story. Newark, the electronics store, the maintenance uniform, the work gloves emptied onto a counter, the missing label found under the register after the damage was already done. Caroline Whitmore had said, "You stole that watch." For 1 second, Marcus had not been a chief executive officer. He had not been the head of Ellison Shield Insurance. He had not been the man who could decide whether a luxury chain deserved protection. He had been 9 years old again, watching his father stand still while strangers treated his pockets like evidence. That was why he did not smile when he won. Some victories still taste like the wound that made them necessary. At 5:07 that afternoon, Ellison Shield Insurance sent Victor Langford the formal notice. Subject line: Policy Compliance Review and Withdrawal of Renewal Approval. The document was calm. That made it worse. It named wrongful detention of a customer, use of a coercive acknowledgement form, failure to review available video before accusation, failure to report prior customer handling incidents, possible discriminatory enforcement of loss prevention procedures, possible concealment of employee misconduct, camera preservation gaps, internal inventory reporting concerns, increased civil liability exposure. Victor Langford read the notice in his office 3 times. The first time he felt shock. The second time he felt fear. The third time he felt shame. For years, Caroline had sent him clean reports: strong sales, low shrink, soft complaints, customer misunderstanding, merchandise concern, service sensitivity. The words had sounded professional. Now they sounded like curtains. Victor realized something hard. He had trusted the numbers because they made the business look safe. He had trusted Caroline because she made the flagship profitable. He had trusted silence because silence was convenient. But silence is not proof that nothing is wrong. Sometimes silence is proof that people are afraid to speak. That night, Victor called an emergency meeting with outside counsel, human resources, inventory control, branch leadership, and a crisis advisor. Nora Fields joined from a separate office under written protection. Andre Mills gave a statement about the locked door. Tessa Blake was suspended. Caroline Whitmore was removed from all Langford systems pending investigation. The Madison Avenue store closed for 3 days. The sign on the door read, "Temporary Operational Review." Inside, every drawer opened. Every limited piece was counted. Every camera outage log was pulled. Every customer handling form was scanned. Every complaint touched by Caroline team was reviewed again by people who were not paid to protect her reputation. By the second day, the pattern was clear. A missing strap blamed on Mr. Alvarez had been found later in a service drawer. A watch pouch tied to Patrice Coleman had disappeared during a camera outage and then returned after she signed a no-complaint statement.
Dr. Andre Wallace had asked for video after being accused of damaging a clasp. He was told the footage had expired, even though the review showed it existed for 11 more days. A young musician named Caleb Price had signed a handling form because he had a performance that night and did not want police at the store. 7 names, 7 customers, 7 people who walked into a luxury store and left with something taken from them that no insurance policy could easily price. Victor sat with a list in his hands. Nora stood across from him. "Did you know?" he asked. "Not everything," Nora said, "but enough to know it was wrong." "Why did you not come to me?" She looked at him for a long moment. "Because Caroline always said you cared about numbers first, and because the numbers agreed with her." Victor had no answer. Nora continued. "I wrote notes because writing felt safer than speaking. Now I know safe silence is how the wrong people stay powerful." The sentence stayed in the room after she finished. Marcus received the remediation plan that evening, but he did not restore the policy. An apology was not a control. Shame was not a system. Regret did not preserve video, train staff, or protect the next customer who entered alone in a simple coat. Ellison Shield required proof. Full inventory audit across all 5 Langford stores. Camera controls removed from local store managers. Automatic footage preservation for high-value viewings. No customer detention without legal protocol. No search request without documented basis. No customer acknowledgement form unless reviewed by legal and carrier compliance. Report any accusation, detention, or merchandise dispute within 24 hours. A complaint channel outside store management. Written protection for employees who reported policy violations. Review of all prior loss files connected to Caroline or Tessa. Victor signed every condition. He did not like them, but he understood them. Without coverage, the Madison Avenue lease could move into default review. The inventory lender could demand additional reserves. Geneva Meridian could freeze limited edition consignments. Civil liability exposure could sit uncovered in the open. A store full of expensive watches had learned that insurance is not a blanket thrown over a burning room. It is trust that the business knows how not to keep lighting matches. Caroline fought the suspension. She called it panic. Then betrayal. Then unfair treatment of a strong manager. She told investigators she had protected the store. She said Marcus had staged a trap. She said Nora was inexperienced. Andre was weak. Tessa was unstable. And Victor was afraid of bad publicity. But records are patient. They do not need to sound angry. They only need to remain. The video showed Tessa hiding the Black Meridian. The message showed Caroline telling her to create pressure. The email said, "Clean up customer language before renewal review." The false forms showed customers pushed toward silence. The complaint files showed harsh accusations rewritten into soft phrases. By the end of the independent investigation, Caroline Whitmore was terminated for cause. Tessa Blake was terminated and referred for further inquiry over the staged concealment of the Black Meridian and possible prior inventory events. Relevant files were sent to counsel and the proper authorities. Marcus did not celebrate. When Elaine called him with the result, he was sitting in his office with his father's fountain pen on the desk. "Caroline is out," Elaine said. "And Tessa?" "Yes." "What about Nora?" "Protected. Victor wants her in customer experience and compliance." Marcus looked at the pen. "Good." Elaine paused. "You sound sad." Marcus looked toward the city lights. Justice after harm is still late. 3 months later, Marcus returned to Langford Timepieces. The store had reopened with new cameras, new tray handling rules, new management oversight, and a different kind of quiet. Not fear, concentration. Nora Fields stood near the center counter. Her badge was straight now. It read, Customer Experience and Compliance Supervisor. Andre Mills remained at the door, but his role had changed. He no longer hovered behind customers because of clothing, skin, accent, or empty wrists. The new rule above his desk was simple. Observe behavior. Do not invent guilt. At 2:10 in the afternoon, an older black man entered, wearing a navy work jacket with oil marks near one cuff. His hands were rough. His shoes were clean but old. He stood before a simple steel watch and looked at it for a long time. No one followed too closely. No one asked if he knew the price. No one looked at his coat and decided the story. A young associate named Lily approached him with a gentle smile. "Good afternoon, sir. Would you like to see that piece?" The man looked surprised. "I am just looking." "That is perfectly fine," Lily said. "You are welcome to look as long as you like." She logged the viewing, placed the tray under the camera, and explained each step like procedure was respect, not suspicion. Marcus watched from near the entrance with Victor beside him. Victor asked, "Do you think we are ready?" Marcus kept his eyes on the counter. "You are beginning." Victor nodded. "That is fair." "No," Marcus said. "The customers deserved the beginning earlier. You are only getting the chance to prove you understand that now." Victor accepted it. That mattered. In the training room, Nora showed Marcus a framed sentence on the wall. "Protect the merchandise. Never steal the dignity of the customer." Marcus stood still. The words were simple. That was why they worked. Nora said, "I know it does not fix what happened." "No," Marcus said. "But it tells the next employee where to stand before the next mistake." Then Marcus opened his satchel and removed his father's fountain pen. Nora stepped back. "I cannot take that." "You are not taking it," Marcus said. "You are using it." "For what?" "For the first signature in the new complaint review log." Nora held the pen carefully, as if it were more fragile than any watch in the showroom. She signed the first page. Nora Fields, Customer Experience and Compliance Supervisor. The ink skipped once, then it flowed. For a moment, Marcus saw his father hands again. Keys, gloves, bus pass, folded cash. Nothing stolen. No real apology. Then he saw Nora hand moving across paper, making a record that might protect someone his father never got to be. That was not revenge. That was repair. Ellis & Shield did not restore the original policy immediately. Marcus approved only a 90-day conditional policy under enhanced oversight. Monthly compliance reports, random branch audits, camera integrity checks, central legal review for every accusation event. Lower limits until the new procedures proved themselves. Victor accepted every condition. Caroline would have called it humiliation. Marcus called it reality. Trust had to earn its way back through behavior. 6 months later, the numbers changed. Inventory variances dropped. Camera uptime improved. Customer complaints were reviewed within 48 hours. One employee reported a possible bias concern in service assignment, and management corrected it before it became a pattern. The business was becoming safer. But Marcus cared more about what the numbers no longer hid. On the anniversary of the incident, he passed the store without planning to enter. Snow fell lightly over Madison Avenue. Through the window, he saw the older man in the work jacket return with his wife. Lily showed them 2 watches. Nora stood nearby, not hovering, only available. The wife laughed. The man smiled. No one looked suspicious. No one looked afraid. Marcus touched the satchel at his side. The fountain pen was no longer inside. For the first time, that did not feel like loss. It felt like the pen had found the room where it could do the work his father wanted from it. Caroline Whitmore thought she was defending a $186,000 watch. She thought a plain coat, old shoes, and a bare wrist told her who Marcus Ellison was. She thought if she spoke loudly enough, the room would believe suspicion before evidence. And for a moment, it did. That is the danger. A lie does not need everyone to be cruel. Sometimes it only needs one person to accuse, one person to help, and a room full of people to stay quiet. But truth had witnesses too. Nora had the camera. Andre had the locked door. Tessa had the confession. Elaine had the policy. Victor had the responsibility he could no longer avoid. Marcus had the calm of a man who had seen dignity stolen once before and decided his company would not insure a system built to steal it again. So remember the black velvet tray. Remember the locked door. Remember the false form waiting for a signature. Remember the old fountain pen beside the expensive watch. The watch was worth $186,000. But the store almost lost far more. It almost lost the right to be trusted. Because the most valuable thing in any luxury store is not what sits under glass. It is the belief that a person can walk in without being treated as guilty until proven rich. If this story made you think of someone judged before being known, share it. If you believe loss prevention should never become dignity prevention, say so in the comments. And if you want more stories where quiet truth stands up to polished arrogance, subscribe and stay close. Because the next person accused may not have a chief executive title. They may only have their name. And that should have been enough from the beginning.